Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Giantess anime drawing tutorial. And in today's tutorial, we're going to look at the same character we drew last time, but this time we'll be looking at them from behind. So that way we'll be able to see the same sort of proportions, but at a different angle here. So I'm going to give myself a little bit more space here. Keep drawing them too close to the edge. But first I just drew in a quick circle. And I'm keeping all my construction lines very, very light, that way they're not too distracting. And especially if you're doing this traditionally with like a pencil, you want to keep your construction lines as light as you can, just to ensure that you don't actually see them in your finished piece. So I'm going to draw in my head shape. I'm actually going to make my circle just a slightly bit bigger here. And then I like to just draw in the jaws anyways. We're not going to see most of the chin or anything like that, but it helps me just sort of see what's going on here. So we'll do that, and then right here, kind of at the base of the circle, would be where our neck would connect. Let's do a simple neck shape. From there, put my ears in. I want the shoulders to be just outside of the ears here on our little line. That way we have plenty of space to work with. And then I can connect these with some traps, which now I can then see that I'll bring this circle in just a little bit. And remember, all these are just guides. It doesn't have to be perfect, and certainly while you're working on the construction lines, it doesn't need to look perfect either. We're going to be rebalancing and messing with it and tweaking things as we go. But for right now, do this. So next, if we pay attention to what we did before, I brought the rib cage pretty much right under here. And again, for these tall, sort of stretched out characters, it's okay to bring areas down a bit, but then we want to make sure that they're remaining relatively skinny. Of course, you can make a thick giant, but for this character, we're trying to really exaggerate that everything's kind of stretched out. So I'm going to do that, like so. From there, we'll just use this kind of guideline right here for the head heights, and that'll kind of map out right where I want my hips to be. And I'm just going to mark out little lines here that are just outside shoulder width. And then, again, using our old one as a reference, we can kind of see that we ended the hip bucket kind of in the middle of this line. And we'll swoop up like this. And then from there, we can connect this hip bucket shape. You could make this a little bit bigger as well, like thicker, so you could bring it down a little bit further before you connect in, and that would look good too. But I want to keep her hips kind of small in terms of like their width for me. This, and we'll rebalance these hips and stuff as we go too, so don't worry about that. And then again, I like just marking out where the hips are themselves, just because they're not going to move anywhere, so it'll help us kind of place the character around them. Now put a slightly concave line right there for the back. And then right off of our little rib line, I will put in just a swooping line to connect down to our hips. And from there, now we can more clearly see what rebalancing needs to be done on each side. So we'll just kind of do that. I want to keep her hips relatively smooth. I don't want them to be too rigid looking. Kind of smooth that down a little bit. Alright, from there we might as well, I guess this one I'm going to suck in just a little bit like that. There we go. Alright, from there we can put in our legs. So I'm just going to draw quick, just straight guidelines to loosely follow. From there we're going to put our knee circle kind of, well, more like an oval shape, but we'll put that like right in the middle of the leg, kind of, right in there. From there, we can kind of follow the same shape that we did for our previous one, especially for this inner thigh. So we'll swoop in just before we pudge back out, and then we suck it right back in to where all like the knee tendons are, something like that. And then we can do the same for the outer thigh, keep it at the thickest, kind of up by the hip for our female characters. Do that. Then for this, we can add some little lines. These little lines would be more visible in the line art section, but we have little lines there just to mark out like all of this over here are tendons. From there, I'm just going to make sure that our guidelines are straightened out from here. And just like before, kind of in the halfway point of this final block down here, I'll mark out where I want my heels to go. And then from there, kind of swooping off the tendons here, I'll put in a rather strong calf. So I'm actually going to keep, actually going to bring this in a little bit, it's a little bit too much. Something like that. I'm going to keep this inside calf bulge not quite as pronounced as the outer calf bulge. Just because with our character at this angle, the calf is going to appear larger on the outside than on the inside of the leg here. And then I'll connect these, and again, I'm kind of connecting it with a line like this, because this is like where our tendons are, right? And then the calf kind of pops out, so it'll look better in the line art, be a bit easier to see, but it's kind of the idea I'm going for there. And then from there, just super basic little heel shapes here, just so you can see the balance of our character. Alright, so from there, I'm just gonna make sure her lats, so this little pocket up here in the armpit, these are her lats, and I want to make sure that they're not too wide on our female character. I'll kind of bring her shoulder blades down a little bit, like that. From there, I'll put in little arms, just off to the side, like what we've always been doing here. At some point, I'll make tutorials on like poses and things like that that you guys can use as references and learn from, so you can actually draw some more interesting poses and stuff, or at the very least, just have something to see what I'm thinking of when I'm trying to draw those. But for right now, when we're just trying to learn how to draw these characters, I find that keeping the poses pretty simple is a little bit more helpful. Because learning a complex pose is hard enough, and then trying to just on the fly learn how to draw a new type of character on top of that is probably a little bit too much for beginners. So do this here. Alright, and then from there, you see that my arm needs to be thickened over here a little bit. There we go. From here, we can kind of see where our breasts fell, and so we'll just barely see them poking out over here. And then again, I'm just looking at the character, seeing what needs to be rebalanced. I'm gonna grab my lower body here and just slightly move it over this way, and then grab this whole leg line and hip and just bring them in slightly. I actually think I'll just move this back to where it was, because now that I moved that back in, got ahead of myself there scooting this. I think it really just needed to have that one pulled in a little. again, if you're doing this and you're trying to like upload anything, or you're trying to push your limits and really get some good practice in, then I would definitely recommend at the end of your construction lines and take a step back so that way you can come back to it in like a couple minutes, maybe even an hour, and then you'll be looking at it with fresh eyes. It's pretty tough to just immediately see what needs to be rebalanced, or at the very least see what you have to do to rebalance it or make it look better. It's pretty tough to do that while you're working on it, so I'd recommend taking a step back and figuring it out. But either way, from there we're now going to put in our glute line. So keeping off of this other one, we kind of want our glutes to end kind of in this area here. So remember, the curvature is going to be a pretty tight, bold curve near the bottom, and then relatively flat near the top. It doesn't have to perfectly follow this line. We just want to try to get the shape right. Do this, bring this portion down. Something like that. There we go. So, I guess just slightly move my neck. There we go. Actually, I just think I'll move this in a little bit. There. Alright. So now I will do the line art, and I'm not too concerned about the quality of my line art, because for this tutorial it doesn't really make sense for me to really focus on getting the right line weight and making sure my lines connect all nicely, so just bear with me here. Although I will erase some of this. So put in the traps, then I'll put in our sort of lat and just back in general right there. Put in some shoulder blades, markings. From there I can put in my shoulder, hand, like so. Like that. This forearm got a little too thick, so I'll just move it in a little bit. I'll just put in where we'd be seeing the breast. Then a slightly concave line here, very slight, just to show that there's a little bit of curve going on right there. Then I will draw my hips, just because these are unmovable, so we know that everything will have to be kind of balanced off of them. Like that curvier shape, so I'll just try to mimic it over here. Then I will connect these together. Then I'll just draw in my glutes, connect these, like so. And notice how at the end here, I'm kind of swooping in and back out ever so slightly. I'm not trying to make it too exaggerated, but just to show like the knee tendons here, I like to do that. And then we'll just connect these for our calves. Like so. Then our heel. And again, this heel doesn't need to be perfect. It's just a placeholder of a foot anyway. So, and yeah, so basically just same principles as last time. We're just trying to stretch out our character kind of as much as we can before they start looking too wonky. But for your giant characters, it's okay if they're not 100% perfect because they're just meant to be a fantastical character anyways, so just try to stretch them out a little bit, kind of play around with perspective to make them appear even bigger. But yeah, just keep playing with it and eventually you'll get it down. So either way, I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and I'll see you in part 3.